My wife, Romy, and I had been desperate for a getaway. Work was eating us alive. She's a teacher, I'm in sales, and we both needed a break. When we found a little Airbnb on a small island off the coast of Florida, it felt like the perfect escape. The photos looked amazing. A cozy two-bedroom cottage right on the beach, with palm trees swaying in the background and ocean views that could have been pulled from a travel magazine. Best of all, just $150 a night for a whole week. Compared to everything else we saw, it was almost suspiciously cheap. I even joked, this is too good to be true. Turns out, I should have taken that more seriously. The reviews had red flags, lots of them. Guests complained about ridiculous fees, like $200 charges if a chair was left out of place or if a dish was in the sink. People said the owner was controlling, obsessive, and quick to penalize. But we brushed it off, figuring they were exaggerating. We just wanted to be in vacation mode. Then, 2 nights before we left, the host, his name was Mr. Heron, sent me a message asking if he could call me. That was already strange. I've stayed in dozens of Airbnbs, and no host had ever asked for a personal phone call. But I didn't want to cancel last minute, so I agreed. The call lasted 20 minutes. At first, it was polite, questions about our trip, our jobs, Romy's work. But then it got invasive. He asked about our daily routines, what time we usually ate dinner, when we like to wake up, whether we'd have visitors. I tried to shrug it off as him being overly friendly. But the longer it went, the more uneasy I felt. When the call ended, he emailed me a 27-page PDF of house rules. 27 pages. Every little detail was micromanaged. Don't touch the thermostat. No guests allowed under any circumstances. Don't move furniture even an inch. Follow cleaning instructions exactly as listed. He made me confirm I read it, and then insisted I send Romy's full name, phone number, and email, too. He said it was for emergency contact, but it felt like he wanted our entire identity on record. Still, we went along with it. We just wanted to get the vacation started. The island itself was gorgeous. Clear water, quiet beaches, barely any tourists. At first glance, the house matched the photos too. White siding, a wraparound porch, steps from the sand. Inside, though, it was dated. Wood paneling, old floral furniture, creaky floors. Not exactly luxury, but fine. We didn't care. Then we noticed the labels. Everything, and I mean everything, was labeled. Stickers marked each kitchen cabinet. Plates, bowls, forks, even the refrigerator shelves. Milk only, vegetables only. It felt less like a rental and more like a lab experiment. From day one, Romy and I both felt it, like someone was watching us. We'd be talking in the living room, and I'd swear I heard faint clicks or a low hum. The place didn't have obvious cameras, no Ring doorbell, nothing like that. But one thing stood out, a modern smart thermostat on the wall. That detail gnawed at me. The entire house was stuck in the 80s, but there was this one sleek, Wi-Fi connected device. We tried to ignore it, focusing on the beach and relaxation. But the sense of being watched never left. At night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, convinced there were eyes on us. On the 3rd night, a storm rolled in. Lightning cracked, thunder shook the walls, and the power cut out for a few minutes. When it came back, the Wi-Fi was down. Before I even had a chance to reset the router, my Airbnb inbox pinged. It was him. Power outage, he wrote. My housekeepers went out too. I see the thermostat disconnected. Please reconnect the Wi-Fi ASAP. My blood went cold. How did he know our power went out within minutes? And why was he tracking the thermostat? Supposedly, he lived on the mainland, hours away. There was no reason he should have been monitoring anything in real time. That's when we started searching. And in the living room, we spotted it, a smoke detector that looked off, bulkier than normal. I stood on a chair, peered closer, and my stomach dropped. A tiny lens, a hidden camera. We checked the rest. One in the kitchen, one in the hallway, and worst of all, one in the bedroom, pointed directly at the bed. Romy panicked. He's been watching us this whole time, she whispered. We scrambled to tape over the lenses, but the damage was already done. He had days' worth of footage. Us unpacking, eating, laughing, sleeping, changing. All of it. That night, we barely slept. Every sound felt like footsteps. Every creak of the old floorboards made my skin crawl. I kept thinking about that phone call, how he pried for personal details, how obsessed he seemed with our routines. Suddenly, that 27-page PDF made sense. The line about do not tamper with devices. The next morning, I confronted him through Airbnb messages. He replied like it was nothing, for security only, standard in rentals. But Airbnb's policy is clear. Cameras must be disclosed. And they were definitely not disclosed. We thought about leaving, but the ferry only ran twice a day. We were stuck, and that's when things got even stranger. That afternoon, while Romy was taking a nap, I heard the sound of a car idling outside. Curious, I peeked through the blinds. A black SUV sat parked down the street with the engine still running. It didn't move for half an hour, just sitting there like it was waiting for something or someone. Eventually, it rolled away. Coincidence? Maybe. But deep down, my gut told me otherwise. Later that evening, a message from Mr. Harlan popped up on my phone. Enjoying the beach? Saw the weather's nice. I froze. How did he know we'd gone to the beach? We hadn't posted anything online, and Romy's location sharing was turned off. That's when it hit us, the Wi-Fi. If he had access to the network, he could have been monitoring everything. Our phones, our searches, maybe even our messages. We immediately disconnected and switched to mobile data only. By nightfall, we'd made up our minds. We were leaving early. We started packing and cleaning, making sure to follow every single one of his ridiculous rules to avoid extra fees. That's when I found it, tucked just under the bed frame, a small spiral notebook. I flipped it open. My blood ran cold. Inside were handwritten logs of guests, exact times of arrival, when they unpacked, where they spent time, even snippets of conversations. One entry read, couple argued in kitchen, extra cleaning fee. Another matched the date of a review I'd read online. This man wasn't just strict, he was documenting and spying on people like we were lab rats. Romy grabbed her phone and tried calling Airbnb support. The connection was bad, the signal cutting in and out, but we managed to get through. They said they would investigate, but until the next ferry, we had no choice but to stay one more night. That final night was hell. We barricaded the doors with chairs, left every light on, and sat in silence, listening. At around 2 a.m., the power cut again, this time for much longer. The house went pitch black. Then came a sound at the window. Scratching. Not the wind. Not an animal. Something deliberate. My phone buzzed in the darkness. Another message from Harlan. Wi-Fi down again. Housekeeper checking in. We froze. Outside, headlights flared across the blinds. The black SUV was back. Romy whispered, "He's here." We grabbed each other and locked ourselves in the bathroom, our hearts pounding like drums. The scratching stopped. 10 agonizing minutes passed. Then, just like before, the SUV pulled away. The power flicked back on, but sleep was impossible. At first light, we bolted. We didn't eat. We didn't shower. We just grabbed our bags, sprinted to the ferry, and didn't look back. On the way home, my phone buzzed one more time. It was a review from Mr. Harlan himself. Great guests. Followed all rules. 5 stars. We reported everything. Every camera, every note, every message. Eventually, Airbnb suspended his listing, but I'll never forget the feeling of being trapped in that house, watched from every angle. That cheap paradise wasn't a vacation, it was a setup, a trap, and we walked straight into it. If a deal ever feels too good to be true, trust your gut and run. We learned the hard way. 2 years later, on a rainy Thursday night in Tacoma, Washington, I found myself in another situation that made my skin crawl. I was walking home after a late shift at work. It was just before 11 p.m., and since I didn't own a car at the time, I had about a 15-minute walk from the bus stop to my apartment. The streets were slick and shiny under the yellow streetlights. My hood was up, my umbrella barely holding back the steady rain. My phone was down to 12% battery. It felt like an ordinary night, quiet, empty, until I heard footsteps. At first, they were distant. Then they grew steady. I glanced back and saw a man in a dark hoodie, about half a block behind me. He didn't look at me, just kept walking in the same direction. I told myself it was nothing, just another pedestrian. But when I crossed the street, so did he. When I slowed down to tie my shoelace near a shuttered taqueria, he slowed too. That's when my heart began to race. His footsteps were heavier, louder, each one echoing against the wet pavement. My instinct screamed that this wasn't coincidence anymore. I picked up my pace, heading toward the only place still lit, a small convenience store. I pushed open the glass door, the bell chiming softly. Warm air and the smell of coffee hit me. The clerk behind the counter gave a nod. I grabbed a bottle of water and a pack of gum I didn't even want, trying to look normal. Through the glass, I saw him. The man in the hoodie stopped just outside under the awning. He didn't come in. He just stood there, facing the door. My hands shook as I whispered to the clerk, "I think someone followed me here." He leaned over, glanced outside, then looked back at me calmly. "You can wait in here as long as you need." I paid quickly and lingered inside, pretending to scroll my phone. My battery blinked down to 7%. Outside, the man stood motionless. Then, a white cargo van rolled up beside him. No side windows. Old, dirty, a dent above one wheel. The kind of van you never want to see late at night. The man opened the passenger door and climbed in. The van idled for a moment, then pulled away. Relief washed over me, but my stomach still twisted with unease. After waiting 5 more minutes, I finally stepped back outside. I stuck to the main road, walking fast with my keys between my fingers the way my mom taught me. The rain hammered down. Passing headlights flashed now and then, but otherwise the streets were empty. That's when I heard it, an engine crawling slowly behind me. I looked, the same white van, creeping along, matching my pace. I didn't think, I ran, turned sharply into the nearest alley, splashing through puddles, my umbrella banging against my side. The alley stank of garbage and oil, dumpsters pressed tight against brick walls. The van stopped at the alley's mouth, headlights glaring like spotlights. I crouched behind a dumpster, trying not to breathe too loud. The van idled. Then I heard it, the sliding door creaking open. Silence followed. Panic surged through me. Then, like a miracle, I saw it. Down the alley, half a block away, a police cruiser sat parked under a traffic light. The sight of it filled me with a hope I can't describe. I bolted from behind the dumpster, sprinting toward the cruiser with everything I had. My voice cracked as I screamed, "Help!" The officer who stepped out of the patrol car was a woman, moving quickly with her hand raised. "What's going on?" she asked, scanning my face. I was breathless, pointing back toward the alley. There was a van, an old white cargo van. A guy followed me, got into it, and then they followed me again. "It's right there." She didn't hesitate. She opened the back door of her cruiser and told me firmly, "Get inside." The warmth of the car felt safe for the first time all night. She grabbed her radio, said something I couldn't make out, and then drove forward into the alley. But by the time we got there, it was empty. My umbrella lay in a dirty puddle where I'd dropped it, but the van was gone. Completely vanished. She asked me to go over everything. I described it the best I could. Old white cargo van, no side windows, dent above the rear driver's side wheel, missing hubcap on the passenger side, dirty paint. The guy I saw first had a hoodie, short beard. I didn't catch the plate. She nodded, jotting notes, then said, "You did the right thing coming to me. Next time, don't wait. Call 911 right away." Her patrol lights flashed as she circled slowly through the side streets, but the van never appeared again. The speed at which it disappeared made me feel sick. Whoever those men were, they knew how to move fast. The officer offered to drive me home. My apartment was only about a mile away, but I wasn't about to argue. I sat in the back seat while rain streaked across the windshield, my hands still trembling. She wrote down a few things on a notepad, then handed me a card with her name and a case number. "We'll keep an eye out tonight. Stay safe." When she dropped me off, she didn't leave right away. She waited outside until she saw me unlock the door and step inside. I locked it twice, then sat on the floor in my wet clothes, finally able to breathe. My phone had died, but for the first time that night, I felt like I might actually be out of danger. The next morning, I walked back to the convenience store in daylight to see if my umbrella was still there. It was gone. The clerk recognized me immediately and asked, "You all right?" I told him I was fine, though I didn't really believe it myself. He shook his head and said he'd seen that same van around before, but he didn't know who it belonged to. That same day, I bought pepper spray and swore I'd stop walking home alone at night. They never did catch the van. Sometimes, especially when it rains, I still hear footsteps behind me and picture that dented, dirty white van creeping along the curb. That wasn't the only time I had close call. Just last year, I decided to sell my old IKEA desk. It was one of those basic models I'd had for years, sitting in the corner of my bedroom until I replaced it with a standing desk. I took some measurements, snapped a few photos, and listed it on Facebook Marketplace and Craigslist. In my post, I made it clear. The desk was on the third floor of a walk-up building, and it would take 2 people to carry it. A man messaged me that same afternoon. No profile picture, just a first name. He didn't ask about condition, measurements, or anything else, just if it was still available and if I took cash. That was it. Something about it fell off, but I replied anyway, reminding him it was 3 flights of stairs. He answered with nothing more than a thumbs-up emoji. My apartment is in a small brick building with a buzzer that barely works. Usually, buyers text me when they arrive, and I go down to meet them. That night, just as a precaution, I texted a friend that someone was coming to pick up the desk. I even propped my door open with a shoe so I wouldn't fumble with keys if things felt sketchy. Right after sunset, he showed up in a silver sedan. The trunk was already open. Inside was a folded moving blanket, bungee cords, and a long coil of rope. My stomach tightened. He got out wearing a baseball cap and hoodie. No smile, no small talk, just a quick nod, like we had some secret arrangement. "Third floor?" he asked. "Yeah," I said cautiously. "It's not that heavy, but awkward. I'll need your help." He looked past me at the entrance, then muttered, "No thanks. I'll just wait outside." I thought he was joking and gave a nervous laugh. "I can't carry it by myself." He didn't laugh. He just stared up at the windows, like he was counting floors, before shrugging and finally agreeing to help. As we climbed, his shoes dragged on the stairs. At the second floor landing, he asked, "Anybody else live with you?" I lied instantly. "Yeah, my roommate's on a late shift." In reality, I live alone, but there was no way I was telling him that. When we reached my door, he paused in the threshold, leaning in but not stepping inside. His eyes scanned everything, my locks, the hallway, even the Ring camera, before he finally followed me to the desk. "Nice place," he said flatly. "Quiet building." We lifted the desk together, awkwardly maneuvering it into the hall. Halfway down, he casually dropped this line. "You hear about that woman who got raped and killed through Craigslist recently?" I froze. My chest tightened against the desk edge. "No," I said, forcing my voice steady. "Yeah," he muttered with a thin smile. "People are crazy." I wanted to throw the desk down and slam the door, but we were already halfway out. If I blocked the hall, I'd trap myself inside. So I stayed quiet and pushed through it. We carried it down the stairs in silence. Outside, the street was dark and empty. Normally, one of my neighbors would be on his fire escape smoking, but not that night. The sedan still idled with its trunk open. The rope and bungees were arranged neatly, like he prepped them before even coming up. "Should fit," he muttered. He pulled out a wad of cash wrapped with a rubber band, the bills worn and crumpled from passing through too many hands. He counted slowly, then handed me the exact amount. No haggling, no questions. We slid the desk into the trunk, tied it down, and he shut it with a rope dangling under the latch. Then he looked up at my windows again. "You ever get worried doing this?" he asked suddenly. I swallowed. "I'm careful." "Good," he said, locking eyes with me. "You should be." With that, he climbed into his car and drove off, the loose rope flicking against the bumper as he disappeared around the corner. Back upstairs, I double-locked both doors, texted my friend that it was done, and sat on the couch replaying his words. The way he said them, it wasn't casual. It felt deliberate, like he wanted them burned in my memory. Later that night, I opened my laptop and searched Craigslist murder near me. Nothing, just old cases from other states, recycled rumors. But even now, I sometimes wonder, was he making up to scare me, or was he testing me to see how I'd react? It didn't feel like a random comment. It wasn't a warning or small talk. It was something he deliberately chose to say in my hallway, right after asking if I lived alone. That's what made it stick. Later, I pulled up the Ring camera footage. At one point, it looked like he tilted his cap just enough to block his face. Maybe I imagined it, but it unsettled me enough that I saved the clip. That same night, Around midnight, my buzzer rang. One long, unbroken press. No voice on the intercom. I stared through the peephole for minutes, but the hallway was completely empty. My phone buzzed immediately after. It was a text from an unknown number, asking if the desk was still available. The name was identical to the buyer's. Like he'd forgotten he already picked it up. My stomach dropped. I didn't answer. I blocked the number, archived the listing, and reported him through the app. That night, I wedged a chair under the doorknob before crawling into bed. Sleep didn't come easy. Every creak in the building, every knock in the pipes, every set of footsteps in the hallway sent me wide awake again. Cars passing on the next block suddenly felt like they were stopping right outside. For weeks afterward, I couldn't shake him. I kept spotting silver sedans. Every man in a cap seemed to resemble him. I carried my keys between my fingers whenever I left or came home. I stopped posting anything with my address online. Selling things was different from then on. If I absolutely had to, I arranged meetings in public spaces, usually in police station parking lots. I even bought a dolly, so I would never again have to rely on a stranger to carry something heavy. But what still haunts me most is that sentence, the one he dropped out of nowhere. It had nothing to do with furniture. It wasn't casual. It was planted there, deliberate, meant to knock me off balance. He wanted me to picture the danger, to think about what could happen in a quiet stairwell or an empty apartment. He left with a desk, but he tried to leave with more than that. He tried to take away my sense of safety in my own home. Looking back, I wish I had shut the door the moment he refused to help carry it. I should have kept the desk, or given it to a neighbor, or dragged it to the curb myself. But instead, I convinced myself it would be fine, that I just had to get through the sale. And that's why I share this now, because it still lingers. Nothing happened. No police report, no news headline, no proof of a crime. But the scariest moments in life don't always leave something you can point to. Sometimes it's just a sentence, a rope in a trunk, and the memory of a man who wanted me to imagine what could have happened. In the fall of 2010, I moved to Cleveland, Ohio to start my master's at Cleveland State University. I rented a small basement apartment off Euclid Avenue. If I cut across Chester and slipped in past Rhodes Tower, I could be in the department office in under 10 minutes. The building always smelled faintly of old carpet, toner, and dust. It had a steady, lived-in feel. By October, I picked up a part-time job in the department office, answering phones, handling schedules, donor lists, and recruiting logistics. I didn't hesitate to take it. Tuition and rent didn't leave room for pride. The chairman was an older Jewish gentleman named Dr. Leonard Katz, though everyone called him Document. He wore heavy wool sweaters that shed fibers across his office and carried an old metal ashtray that clanged whenever he set it down. He smoked a pipe he always packed too tightly. The university had banned smoking indoors years earlier, but Doc's office sat tucked in a quiet corner past the copy room. He kept the door cracked, a fan in the window, and smoked anyway. Everyone looked the other way. Doc loved to talk. He told me about growing up in Brooklyn, about the synagogue his grandfather helped build, and even about Hebrew words he thought I should learn. He showed me my responsibilities, then taught me pieces of his own work too. Before long, I was helping with recruiting visits, alumni events, and donor meetings. We brought money into the department, and no one bothered him about the smoke. I had trained as an EMT before grad school, and Doc quickly learned that. Soon, he was asking me to check his blood pressure a couple times a week. He struggled with gout, hypertension, and a tired heart he pretended wasn't failing him. I'd write the numbers down on sticky notes and slide them under the brass paperweight on his desk. On Mondays, I'd bring him a jar of my grandmother's soup. He'd twist the lid, inhale the steam, and close his eyes just long enough for me to see relief. By winter, it felt like a rhythm that would last forever. I came in just after sunrise, turned on the fluorescents, started the coffee, and answered emails in silence. Doc would arrive mid-morning, pipe in one pocket, ashtray clanging in his hand, folders under his arm. He'd knock his pipe against the ashtray even when it was already clear. One evening in late winter, my phone rang. Doc's voice was flat, almost too calm. He told me he hadn't been able to urinate in a full day. I told him I'd call his son in Shaker Heights and then dial 911. The medics from university hospitals rushed him to Cleveland Medical Center. A nurse later told me bluntly, another day and he wouldn't have made it. They relieved the blockage, and the look on his face afterward was almost unrecognizable, like he didn't know where to put the relief. He moved into Menorah Park in Beechwood for rehab. It was clean, quiet, filled with big windows. I drove out every few days with folders so he could stay connected. He circled names, wrote tight notes in the margins, and gave me instructions on which alumni to approach and how. He told me he missed the echo of our hallway. By late February, another colleague called his room to check in. A paramedic answered. They suspected a stroke. They asked us to contact his family. Doc passed away later that day at the Cleveland Clinic. His funeral was small, held at a chapel on Taylor Road in Cleveland Heights. Snow slushed in the parking lot. His son thanked me for the soup. I didn't know what to say. The first week back in the office without him felt heavy in a way I couldn't describe. His computer and phone were boxed up, everything labeled with blue tape. The old metal ashtray stayed on the desk because no one wanted to touch it. Slowly, the sweet smoke smell that had clung to our hallway faded. About a week after the service, I came in early before anyone else. It was still dark outside. The building was quiet, running on night heat. I unlocked the office that morning like I always did. Lights on, bag down, routine. But before I could even settle, the phone on my desk rang. Nobody ever called that early. I picked it up without my usual greeting, just a quiet hello. What came through wasn't a voice. It wasn't silence either. It was static, the low, steady hiss you get when a radio isn't tuned to a station. Then came a sound that made my stomach drop, metal on metal. My chair rolled back as I stood up. I knew that sound too well. It was Doc, clearing the ashes from his pipe into that old diner-style ashtray. I'd heard it hundreds of times before. The static lingered, like someone was close to the receiver but refusing to speak. Then the line clicked off. My eyes went straight to the caller ID. The display read, internal, followed by 4 digits burned into my memory, Doc's extension. The same one taped inside the supply closet since the day I started. The same one that was supposedly disconnected. I walked down the hall toward his old office. The light above the door was dark, the lock unchanged. I slid my key in and pushed the door open. The ashtray sat in the center of his desk, just as it had the last time I saw it. 2 tiny flecks of ash rested inside. The phone base was gone, boxed up a week earlier, and shelved in the copy room. The line was dead. I told myself I'd imagined it. I told myself I was tired. And for a few minutes, I believed it. Later that morning, Officer James O'Malley from campus police stopped by my doorway. He looked uneasy, pale even. He asked if everything was okay on our floor. I said yes, without thinking. He shook his head slowly and told me what he'd seen. Just after sunrise, while making rounds, he'd watched Doc walk past the copy room and into his office. Same sweater, same careful stride. The door closed behind him. But when O'Malley came back minutes later, the hallway was empty. No light, no sound, no Doc. I never told him about the phone call. He never asked. That afternoon, the smell returned. Not strong, but unmistakable. That faint, cheap, sweet tobacco that clung to your tongue. It lingered just outside Doc's office, hovering over the carpet like it had seeped from the walls themselves. I stood there breathing it in longer than I should have, staring at a closed door with a nameplate I knew would change soon. Time passed. Semesters ended. I finished my degree, moved across town, and built a new life. But whenever I came back to campus, I always walked that hallway. Each year it looked more worn, more unfamiliar. The ashtray eventually disappeared, his office filled with new furniture, new names. Still, the air sometimes felt heavy there. In 2018, I returned to give a lecture. I slipped into the copy room to print handouts and froze when I noticed a familiar cardboard box on the top shelf. Blue tape, black marker, his name written neatly across the front. Inside lay the old handset from his office phone, coiled cord tucked tight. A yellow disconnect tag was taped to it, stamped with the month and year the line was cut. I set the box back and stood in silence. That's when I heard it, metal on metal, clear and sharp, drifting from the direction of his office. Not loud, not dramatic, but exact. The sound of Doc clearing his pipe. The sound no one else could have made. I walked out. The hallway was empty. The smell was there again, faint but real. Before leaving, I stopped by Telecom, needing a rational answer. They pulled the records. Doc's line had been permanently disconnected in March. No patch, no forwarding, no way it could have rung again. I thanked them, rode the elevator down, and watched the floor numbers rise and fall like nothing unusual had happened. Now, whenever I'm back in that building, I don't linger near his office. Sometimes the hallway is just a hallway, and sometimes it isn't. The cornstalks towered above us, easily 7 feet high, dry and brittle, whispering in the wind like they had secrets to tell. The maze stretched in every direction, loops, dead ends, twists that looked the same no matter which way you turned. At first, it was all fun. Tommy darted ahead, giggling, vanishing behind walls of corn only to pop out again with a big grin. The first few times, I caught him quickly, but then he ran farther, laughing, "Can't catch me, Sophia," and I spread out a little, calling his name, expecting him to come running back. At first, it was still playful, but 10 minutes went by with no sign of him. "Tommy, this isn't funny anymore," I yelled, my voice sharper than I meant. Sophia's voice cracked with worry as she called, "Honey, come out now." The maze was disorienting. Every turn looked the same. The sun was still high, so panic hadn't set in yet, but the unease was there. We bumped into other families, asked if they'd seen a little boy alone. They shook their heads. No one had. By 4 p.m., the staff announced over the speakers that the maze would be closing soon. That's when dread sank in. We told a worker at the exit about Tommy wandering off. He radioed others, but there was no update. "Kids hide all the time," one man said casually. "He'll turn up," but he didn't. As the crowd thinned, fear hollowed out my chest. Sophia's eyes filled with tears. We ran to the car, grabbed flashlights, and went back in, even though the place was shutting down. Night fell fast. By 6 p.m., it was pitch black, no moon, only stars above. The wind hissed through the corn like voices we couldn't understand. We shouted Tommy's name, over and over, the sound bouncing back at us with no reply. The cell signal was weak, but we managed to call 911. The dispatcher promised deputies would be on their way. "Stay put," she said, but staying put wasn't an option. We pushed deeper, our flashlights slicing through the blackness. About an hour later, Sophia spotted something in the mud. Tommy's red sneaker, half buried like he had tripped. My heart sank. "Oh God," she whispered, her hands shaking. Small footprints led away from the path. Then, bigger ones, adult-sized boots, pressed into the dirt alongside them. That's when we heard it. A low whistle. Slow. Deliberate. Not far away. "Who's there?" I shouted, aiming my beam toward the sound. The corn rustled, but no one answered. We followed the prints anyway, adrenaline pounding in our veins. The maze seemed endless now, twisting back on itself, playing tricks with our sense of direction. Sophia clutched my arm. Her voice was trembling when she said, "What if someone took him?" I didn't want to say it, but she was right. Nebraska's fields aren't just empty, they're isolated. Drifters pass through all the time, squatting in barns, hiding in harvest fields. People vanish in rural towns, sometimes without a trace. We stumbled into a small clearing, the stalks trampled flat. Trash littered the ground. Empty cans, cigarette butts, a filthy sleeping bag tossed in the dirt. Someone had been living there, hiding inside the maze itself. Then we heard a gravelly voice from the shadows. Looking for the boy. A figure stepped forward, tall and ragged in a worn coat. His beard was wild, his eyes darker than the night around us. He smirked. "He's safe for now, but you gotta play my game." It was later we learned his name, Earl. A drifter who had been crisscrossing the Midwest for years, slipping through towns, dodging warrants. He had a pattern, using crowded core mazes and county fairs to lure kids when their parents weren't looking. Sometimes he demanded ransom. Other times, the kids were never seen again. Sophia screamed, "Give him back." Earl just laughed. "Follow me if you can." But one wrong turn and he's gone. And then he bolted into the corn. We chased him, but he knew the maze like he had built it himself. He cut through hidden paths, secret trails he'd carved over weeks. Our flashlights caught fleeting glimpses of his coat, flapping as he disappeared again. Then came the worst part. He began mimicking Tommy's voice. "Mommy," he called in a high-pitched whine, echoing through the stalks. Sophia nearly collapsed, sobbing, clutching at my sleeve. We found Tommy's other shoe smeared with mud. My mind raced with horrible images, barns with ransom notes, ditches along the highway, newspaper stories of missing kids. Hours seemed to pass, but finally we heard it. "Daddy." This time it was real. We crashed through the corn into another clearing. Tommy was there, tied to a stake, gagged, his eyes wide with terror. Earl lunged at me, pulling a rusty knife from his pocket. Instinct took over. I tackled him hard, and we rolled in the dirt. The blade slashed across my arm. Pain shot up, but I didn't let go. Sophia grabbed a rock and smashed it into his hand. He howled, the knife clattering to the ground. I pinned him down, screaming for help. And then flashlights, barking dogs, deputies swarming. They ripped him off me, cuffed him, and untied Tommy. He was safe. Cold, terrified, but safe. Later we learned Earl had been stalking families all day, waiting for a child to wander. His plan was to demand $5,000, then hide out in an abandoned silo nearby. That night, we drove home in silence. Tommy slept in the back seat. Sophia stared out the window, tears streaking her cheeks. My arm was bandaged, but it was my mind that wouldn't heal. They shut the maze down for a week. But even now, years later, I wake up in the middle of the night, heart pounding because I hear that whistle. Corn mazes? Never again. She was the kind of person who was always smiling, always making plans, always thinking ahead. No one in our family could have imagined what was about to happen to her. On the night of December 14th, 2007, 21-year-old Leah Hickman finished her shift at the salon where she worked and returned to her apartment. She lived on the third floor of a modest brick building near Marshall University in Huntington, West Virginia. From the outside, it looked ordinary, just another college town apartment building. But stepping inside, I always felt uneasy. The hallways were narrow, the lighting was poor, and at night, the silence felt heavy, almost unnatural. Leah shared that apartment with her half-sister, but on this particular night, she was alone. She had spoken to a few friends earlier in the evening, but after that, her phone went quiet. The next day, when Leah didn't show up for work, her coworkers grew concerned. She was responsible, dependable, never the type to just disappear without telling anyone. First, her job tried to reach her. Then her sister called. Still nothing. By the evening of December 15th, my aunt, Leah's mother, was frantic. Leah always checked in, and for her to go completely silent was terrifying. I'll never forget going with my aunt to Leah's apartment. Walking up those dim stairs, I prayed she would simply be inside, embarrassed that everyone was panicking. But when we got to the door, it was locked. Her car was in the parking lot. Inside, her purse and shoes were there, exactly where she'd normally leave them. Yet Leah herself was gone. No overturned furniture, no broken glass, just an eerie stillness, as if she had stepped out for a minute and never returned. The police became involved almost immediately. They canvassed the building, knocked on doors, questioned neighbors. Some residents reported hearing footsteps late that night, but nothing concrete came from it. The building also had a basement, a damp, unsettling place with old storage rooms. Police searched it, but initially came up empty-handed. Days turned into a blur. Flyers went up all across Huntington. Our family stayed glued to the phone, desperate for updates. At night, I lay awake picturing her, wondering if she was scared, if she was hurt, if she was still alive. Then came December 19th, 5 days after Leah vanished. Investigators decided to recheck the basement. This time, they looked deeper, and that's where they found her. Leah's body was hidden inside a crawl space under the stairs. Even saying those words now makes my stomach drop. She had been right there, beneath our feet, while we searched above her. The news shattered the entire community. Who could have done this to a kind, hard-working 21-year-old woman who had no enemies? Police questioned coworkers, friends, even neighbors from the building. Rumors swirled, but no arrests were ever made. To this day, Leah's case remains unsolved. What makes it all the more chilling is how ordinary her last night was. She worked a shift. She came home. Maybe she thought about Christmas, maybe watched TV, maybe got ready for bed. Then, at some point, someone entered her life and ended it. No alarms, no shouts for help, just silence. For me, the hardest part is knowing how alone she must have felt. Your home is supposed to be your safe place. For Leah, it became the place where her future was stolen. Even now, when I drive past that building, I feel a cold shiver. Students and young people still live there, probably unaware of the tragedy buried in its history. They come and go like it's any other apartment, but I wonder if they know Leah's story, or if they're just walking past the memory of something unspeakable. Our family has worked to keep Leah's memory alive, but the pain never fades. What makes it worse is knowing justice has never been served. Whoever took her life has never been caught. They could still be out there. Someone bold enough to take a young woman from her own apartment, hide her body just a few feet away, and then disappear as if nothing ever happened. Leah was only 21. She had so much ahead of her. And on one ordinary December night, her future ended. For us, the horror of that silence still lingers. I made a quick judgment call that night, one I'll never stop replaying in my head. I thought if I moved in closer, maybe I could de-escalate things myself. The woman, she looked to be in her 60s, backed into her bedroom as we approached. My instincts told me not to lose sight of her. I followed, a few other officers right behind me, and I tried to keep my voice steady. "You're safe. We're just here to help." At first, it seemed like maybe I was getting through. She had scissors in her hand, but after some coaxing, she laid them on the bed. For a brief second, I thought we'd turn a corner. But then everything changed in a heartbeat. I stepped forward, reaching to gently restrain her, worried she might grab the scissors again. Protocol usually says wait for backup, take it slow, use non-lethal options when you can. But in that moment, I convinced myself I could handle it. I thought being direct would end it quickly. I was wrong. She was faster than I expected. Before I knew it, she reached under her pillow and pulled out a baseball bat. She stood up, gripping it with both hands like a batter ready to swing, and stepped toward me. My chest tightened. My heart was hammering in my ears. I pulled my gun, backing up, shouting again and again, "Drop it. Please drop the bat. I don't want to hurt you." But she didn't drop it. She raised the bat higher and then swung, straight for my head. In that split second, I saw what could happen. One solid hit and my skull could shatter. I could die right there in that bedroom. I had no choice. I pulled the trigger. 2 shots. They hit her in the torso. She collapsed, the bat falling to the floor. She was groaning, still moving at first, but then she went quiet. My hands shook as I called for medical help over the radio. The EMT rushed in. We started CPR immediately. When paramedics arrived, they tried everything, but it was too late. At the hospital, she was pronounced dead. Her name was Deborah Danner. She was 66 years old. Later, I learned she'd been battling schizophrenia for decades. She wasn't on drugs that night. It was a severe mental health episode. She had even written about her struggles, about how living with her illness felt like a curse, but one that wasn't supposed to end her life. I can still hear myself muttering afterward, why did she have to swing that bat? I wasn't sobbing, but inside I was breaking. I'd handled dozens of similar calls without ever pulling the trigger. But in that one instant, it became her or me. And to survive, I fired. The aftermath was worse than the moment itself. Less than 6 hours later, I was pulled from duty. My badge and gun were taken. The mayor went on record saying I hadn't followed proper protocols, that if I had, maybe Deborah would still be alive. The next day, protests broke out. Crowds marched from her building to our precinct, chanting, demanding justice. She was a black woman. I was the white officer who shot her. Her death became a rallying point for police brutality and Black Lives Matter. Months later, I was charged with second-degree murder. Sitting in court, I had to relive every second, testifying about each decision. I told the judge exactly what happened, how I stepped in because I thought I could keep her from arming herself again, how she was faster than me, how when that bat came for my head, my life flashed before my eyes. In 2018, after a long, grueling trial, the judge acquitted me. He ruled it was self-defense. Legally, I walk free, but emotionally, I've never escaped it. The guilt lingers. Some nights I ask myself, What if I had waited for the crisis intervention team? What if I'd used my taser instead? Could she have lived? That night didn't just take Deborah's life. It changed mine forever. One of my fellow officers, Edward, and I tried CPR on her for almost 10 minutes before paramedics took over. We prayed she'd pull through. She didn't. That memory burns in me. I'm still a cop today, back on the job after the trial. Nothing that intense has happened since, and I'm grateful for that. But every time I get a call involving someone in crisis, I feel the weight of Deborah Danner's story. It reminds me how fragile these encounters really are. We need better training. We need more resources for mental health. Because no one, absolutely no one, should have to die like that. And no officer should ever have to face that choice, knowing the world will never see the split-second terror, only the bullet that followed. Dead serious. The man growled before slamming the phone down. My first thought was my dad. Maybe this was one of his pranks. But when I called him, his voice was steady, concerned. It wasn't him. My stomach tightened. My sister and her boyfriend traded uneasy glances. We tried to laugh it off, but the tension lingered like a faint smell you can't quite place, the kind that tells you something's wrong. We headed down to the hot tub to join the wedding guests, forcing ourselves to relax. But in the back of my mind, the call kept replaying. Hours later, past midnight, we returned to our room. The air felt different, thicker somehow. We tried to settle in, brushing teeth, folding clothes, going through bedtime routines. Then the phone rang again. Same voice, same menace. You think you're funny? Running around like animals? You need to stop. My hands trembled as I gripped the receiver. We weren't even out there. I managed, my voice unsteady. Click. He hung up. This time, I dialed the front desk. A woman answered, professional, polite, but alarmed when I explained. No, ma'am. No one from the hotel has called your room tonight. I'll send someone up immediately. 15 minutes later, a staff member in a sharp suit knocked. He looked tired, his voice hushed, almost apologetic. We believe the calls are coming from a guest down the hall. He's caused trouble before. We're asking him to leave in the morning. Until then, please do not engage with him. We nodded. The moment he left, the phone rang a third time. My sister's boyfriend snatched it up, snapping into the receiver. There's a man in this room. Silence, then a click. The caller hung up. We unplugged the phone. We thought that would be the end. It wasn't. Around 3 a.m., a faint scraping sound jolted me awake. I froze, listening. There was again soft, deliberate brushing against the door. My chest tightened. I slid out of bed, moving quietly, careful not to wake the others. A shadow stretched across the thin gap at the bottom of the door. Someone was standing right outside. I didn't move. I didn't open it. I just stood there, heart hammering, until the shadow shifted and disappeared. Morning came, but instead of relief, we found a note slipped under the door. The handwriting was jagged, masculine, written on hotel stationery. You ruined my night. I hope you understand what it's like now. I heard every word, every step. I don't forget people who make me lose sleep. No name, no room number. Just that. My blood ran cold. We hadn't been loud. We hadn't done anything. That meant he'd been listening, watching. He knew when we came back. He knew when we went to bed. He had been right outside our door while we slept. The hotel staff moved quickly. They confirmed he had checked out early that morning. Security pulled the hallway footage but refused to show us what they found. No name, no explanation. He was gone. But for the rest of the trip, I was never the same. I avoided elevators, slept in shallow bursts, waking at every creak of the walls. My eyes kept darting to the peephole, half expecting to see that shadow again. The worst part wasn't the phone calls. It was knowing how easily he slipped into our lives for 2 nights without us ever seeing his face. And even now, years later, whenever the phone rings late at night, my stomach knots. My heart skips, because I'll never forget that voice.